Good evening, bonsoir, dobry večer. Dear distinguished guests, members of Parliament, presenters, clergy, Ukrainian-Canadian community, and organizations from all over Canada, and guests from all over the world. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you. My name is Dr. Onyschuk, and I am a specialist physician in Ottawa region and an active member of the community in Ottawa. It is my great privilege to be asked to be your honorary banquet chairman at this unprecedented Ukraine at the Crossroads conference, Quo Vadis Ukraine Banquet. During the last 20 years of Ukraine's independence, Canada has been at the forefront of helping support development of Ukraine in the spheres of democracy and human rights, economy and business. Indeed, until the last presidential elections of 2010, hopes were high for sustainable democratic development in Ukraine, and the country has been regarded as a beacon of democracy in the former Soviet Union, with a better track record than most other countries in the region. As you are aware, Ukraine is steadily showing worrisome signs of regression in its democratic development in areas involving human rights, an independent judiciary, the rule of law, and personal, economic, and journalistic freedoms, with democratic gains reversed and the Ukrainian economy steadily deteriorating. Ladies and gentlemen and honored guests, this conference must rise up to the challenge of history and follow up to ensure that urgent resolutions and steps are taken starting the day after the conference, including immediately ensuring that the healthcare needs and independent medical assessment and investigation of Ms. Tymoshenko and other jailed political opposition leaders are met and completed, not just in words, but in concrete deeds to prevent further harm. The Ukrainian Canadian Congress has condemned the jailing of Ukraine's opposition leader Yulia Tymoshenko and another opposition leader Yuri Lutsenko in the past week, and called upon the Government of Canada to work with its Euro-Atlantic partners to take concrete steps against the further curtailment of democracy and erosion of human rights in Ukraine, and called on any Canada-Ukraine free trade talks to be based in strict observance of human rights, which we as Canadians hold dear. It is clearly no longer business as usual. The Canadian government and generations of Ukrainian-Canadian community of over 1.2 million people are and must remain vigilant and take a leadership role to demonstrate to the whole world and the Ukrainian people, who we unwaveringly support, in building a strong, independent, democratic Ukraine in regards to ensuring that human rights obligations in Ukraine are fully met, not discarded or forgotten or omitted by any governing regime now or ever again. Best wishes to all the conference participants and to all the guests of the banquet towards ensuring the success for concrete steps of this important conference. I would like to introduce Mr. Bogdan Onyschuk, Chairman of the Canada-Ukraine Foundation and Conference Organizer, to provide greetings and to guide you through the remainder of the evening. Thank you, merci, дякую.
Wow, you can see how energetic a dinner chairman we had and why we've got a sellout crowd this evening. Thank you, Markian, for the dinner committee, the UCC National Office, Taras Zalutsky, for blowing the doors off the place. It is so loud. I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of one half of the organizers. The other half will be the University of Ottawa, and you'll hear from the dean in a sec, to this conference. As Markian has said, this is an important conference at a very important and a critical juncture in time. not just for Ukraine, but also for Eastern Europe, for Russia, and for the region. As Markian said, Ukraine is going through a steep decline in democracy over the last 2 years, decline in the rule of law, steep increase in corruption, and it is regretfully following Russia's decline into authoritarianism. I say that advisedly, but 2012 is not going to be a very good year for Ukraine, certainly not with the imprisonment of some 20 of its leading democratic leaders, including, of course, the 2 that we've already mentioned. Just 2 facts, and then I will sort of complete my sort of readings. On the democracy front, and there was mention of this made at the parliamentary hearings today, the Democracy Index, which is done by The Economist, has shown some very, very worrying trends. Ukraine has slipped from 53 in 2008, where it's considered to be democratic, to 79 in 2011. It's behind countries like Mongolia, Zambia, Ghana, and Guyana. Most worrisome is this, though, that Ukraine has crossed the line to what is called the hybrid regimes category, which is just one above authoritarianism, and is sliding towards the bottom, which is the authoritarian regime, where Russia sits as the proud owner of spot 117. And on the corruption index, and this was no more sort of facts, it's even worse. Ukraine now ranks 152nd in 2011, below Russia, Togo, Uganda, Belarus, and Nigeria, just above the Central African Republic. It was 118 in 2007, before the Orange Revolution Democrats gave up office. So in putting this conference together with the University of Ottawa and our partners and the parliamentary hearings that ended today, we were hoping to discuss these issues, or why this has happened, and we hope that you'll find it informative and an opportunity for you, all of you, to input into the policy options that the West has to try to bring Ukraine back to the fold of the burgeoning democracies. We'd like to thank our sponsors, and we have a lot of them, and they're in our program notes. And without them, this conference would not have been possible. And so the gold, the platinum, Chris, the gold and the silver sponsors, thank you very, very much. As an opener and a sweetener, after dinner, we're going to give you the first the opening panel discussion, which I think you'll find very, very interesting, with 4 outstanding speakers and a great moderator, as I say, a better cross-examiner than I, Christia Freeland. So with that, let me introduce the head table, and then I'd like to introduce some of the distinguished guests around the room, because although there are 240 of you here, there are about 50 who are really outstanding, and I'd like you to know what their faces look like and who they are. But in terms of the head table, there are 2 head tables because we couldn't get them into one. So on my right, at table number 3, the Honourable Beverley Oda, Minister of International Cooperation. Paul Grod, the UCC National President. Most Reverend Father Peter Galadza, the Ukrainian Catholic Church in Ottawa. Yaris Balan, who's the chairman of the organizing committee for the conference, and the chair of Gary Keller, the chief of staff for John Baird. The minister was to be here. He's in Burma, but he sent a very good replacement in his place. Christopher Onyschuk, the CEO of Community Trust and our platinum sponsor. The Honourable Boris Tarashuk, member of the Verkhovna Rada and chair of the Euro Integration Committee. Tricia Freeland, the global editor-in-charge, Thomson Reuters. And Thomas O'Melia, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for the U.S. At the next, if I can continue to the next head table, or the next part of the head table, first of all, I'll start with my wife, Tanya Onyschuk. Next to her is the Honourable Peter Van Loan, the Government House Leader in the House of Commons. Next to him is somebody who did a knockout job at the Foreign Affairs Committee this afternoon, the Honourable Marcin Świecicki, member of the Polish Sejm, former Minister of Economic. Our Canadian Ambassador to Ukraine, the Honourable, His Excellency, Troy Onyschuk. Chair of the Board of Community Trust Company, Daniel Zadorozny. And his better half, his wife, Oida Zadorozny. One of our partners in this conference, Walter Zaritsky, the Executive Director of the Center of U.S.-Ukraine Relations from New York. Eugene Chuli, the world president of the Ukrainian World Congress. Professor Marcel Marté, the Dean of Sciences of the University of Toronto and the chair of the Ukrainian Studies. Just checking, Marcel, just checking. And Markian Shilikevich, the dinner chair who you've heard. However, we've got a lot more distinguished guests, and I think it appropriate to introduce them, particularly since they're going to be taking part in the discussion later on after dinner. So let me start with the Parliament of Canada, the Honourable Tony Clement, President of the Treasury Board of Canada. Senator Renee Onyschuk, I don't know if she's still here, or did she have to leave? She had a dinner engagement to go. And then we have the Parliamentary Friendship Group, the Canada-Ukraine Parliamentary Friendship Group of 17 MPs. And I'd like to call them all at once and ask them to stand. And then you can recognize them because there are too many of them to do individually. But let me start with Lois Brown, who is the Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of International Cooperation. Bob Deckard, the Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mark Adler, York Centre. Joyce, not here yet? Mark said he's going to be late, right. Joyce Bateman, Winnipeg South Centre. Nice to meet you. James Bazan, the Emperor Incorrigible James Bazan. The Honourable Ralph Goodale. The Honourable Laurie Hahn, who speaks very good Ukrainian profession. Ed Komarnicki. Walter Lizone. Peggy Nash from Parkdale High Park. Did I see Peggy? Sorry. Ted Opitz, I know, is here. Joy Smith. Robert Sopuk, the chair of the Canada-Ukraine. Bernard Trottier, our member of Parliament from Toronto. Mark Barbara, where are you, Mark? Mark in the back. And Mike Wallace from Burlington. And one other chief of staff, he's a good friend of mine, but he's a great chief of staff to a great minister. Neil Desai, where are you, Neil? Minister, chief of staff. We have a number of ambassadors and representatives of other countries. So let me introduce them as I have them here. The Polish ambassador to Canada, His Excellency Zenon Kuzniak-Kamysz. Oh, okay, he took a walk. All right, he'll be back. The first secretary of the Polish embassy, I gather he's here, Jarosław Kurek. The Lithuanian ambassador to Canada, Her Excellency Ginta Damusis. The first secretary of Cultural Affairs of the Ukrainian embassy, Mrs. Natalia Holub. And Mr. Denis Sienik, also at that table. Denis, there you go. The member of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine from the Party of Regions, Ms. Irena Berezhna. Right, she might be late. But ambassadors don't stop there. We have 4 former Canadian ambassadors to Ukraine with us tonight, and I think we need to recognize them. The Honourable Derek Fraser. The Honourable Andrew Robinson. Who's there for the Orange Revolution, and the Honourable Danielle Caron. And although he didn't quite make ambassador, he's the first Consul General of the Canadian Consulate in Kiev, and the first Canadian Chargé d'Affaires, who had to step in for an ambassador for almost 2 years, Denis Grayowski. Finally, though, I think I need to tell you or give you some of the distinguished speakers and conference moderators that are going to be here that, at the conference that I haven't introduced yet. And I'll do them by country. And you'll see that there are 4 or 5 regional groupings. From Ukraine, in addition to Boris Tarasiuk, we've got Oleg Rybachuk, the former Vice Premier of Euro Integration. Valentin Naливайченko, the former head of the Security Service. And now the head of our Ukraine, of the National Board. Halina Koinash from the Kharkiv Human Rights Protection Group. Alona Hetmanchuk, the Institute of World Policy in Kiev, number 5. And Dr. Serhiy Kudelia, visiting scholar at George Washington University. Mykola Ryabchuk, member of the editorial board of Kritika Kiev. Mykola? No? You'll hear him tomorrow. But somebody who's dear to my heart and who had a great role in the Orange Revolution, Mr. Yaroslav Davidovich, the Central Election Committee Chair. The Central Election Committee Chair for the 3rd round of the 2004 elections. From the United States, you'll hear from Thomas Malia, who I've introduced, but we've got 5 others that you haven't heard from yet. Dr. Anders Asland, World Bank economist, Dr. Ariel Cohen, Senior Fellow at the Russian and European Institute of the Heritage Foundation. Judge Bohdan Fute of the U.S. Court of Federal Claims. And Morgan Williams, the chair of the U.S.-Ukraine Business Council. From the UK, EU, and Russia, I've introduced Marcin Swieciecki, but there's Robert Amsterdam, international human rights lawyer, Amsterdam Perhoff. Nikolanga from the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. There he is. From Brussels, Dr. Amanda Paul, a policy analyst of the European Policy Center. Andrei Kromkovsky of the Russian Academy of Science, Executive Director of Strategic Studies in Moscow. We did a terrific job this afternoon at External Affairs. And finally, Professor James Shear, Senior Fellow at Chatham House. And finally, from Canada, you'll hear from the Honourable Peter Van Loan, but we'll have two former ambassadors tomorrow that you've already introduced, that I've already introduced, Derek Fraser, Andrew Robinson, but Dominique Marel, the chair of Ukrainian Studies at the University of Ottawa. Dominique. Dan Bilak, all the way from Kiev, and from a law firm, Cameron McDaniel. Bogdan Harasimiu, University of Calgary. Anselm Kotichny, the chair of the Canada-Ukraine Chamber of Commerce. And Mark-Jan Schwetz, the former president of the UCC Toronto. I toyed whether I should do this or not, but I thought you should know, because you've got some very, very heavy hitters in the room for the discussion. So with that long introduction and introduction of our distinguished guests, let me ask Professor Marcel Mezet, the Dean of Sciences and the chair of the Ukrainian chair at the University of Ottawa, to bring greetings from that partnering organization for this conference. Marcel?